Good morning, I'm Robert Tan sitting in for Mikey Oreta, and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. Government debt payments fell to over 768 billion pesos, or 40% in the first half of the year. Philippine rice imports will exceed 4 million metric tons this year. President Bongbong Marcos flies to India to boost ties. And Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is optimistic that trade negotiations with the U.S. will lead to something constructive. Let's take a look at how global financial markets performed on Friday. U.S. stocks tumbled, dragged by a weaker than expected jobs report and renewed trade tensions. The U.S. economy added just 73,000 jobs in July, far below the 104,000 forecast, while unemployment ticked up to 4.2% from 4.1%. The data stoked concerns of a cooling labor market and triggered a sharp response from President Donald Trump. Trump called the report a mistake, dismissed Bureau of Labor Statistics Commissioner Erica Trarfer, and again lashed out at Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Markets were further rattled by a sweeping executive order imposing a 35% tariff on Canadian goods and reciprocal duties on several other countries. Both the Dow Jones and the S&P 500 fell more than 1%, while the Nasdaq dropped over 2%. In Europe, markets also fell. London's FTSE dropped 0.7%. Germany's DAX and France's CAC 40 lost almost 3%. The United States' imposition of reciprocal tariffs against trading partners violates World Trade Organization rules, according to former Philippine Tariff Commissioner George Manzano. He explains that the tariffs go against the WTO's most favored nation principle, which requires non-discrimination among trading partners. The organization's dispute settlement mechanism, which could mediate this issue, is currently crippled due to the U.S. blocking appointments of judges to the appellate body. As a result, countries like China and Canada have challenged U.S. tariffs, claiming they're inconsistent with WTO rules. Meanwhile, local economists fear that Philippine exports to the U.S., which total $6.6 billion, could be hurt by new tariffs set to take effect on August 7, 2025. The Philippines may be losing its trade edge in the U.S. market. PhilExport President Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. warns that the new 19% U.S. tariff on Philippine goods now matches rates imposed on Indonesia, Thailand, and other ASEAN peers. He says a 19 or 20% rate is acceptable only if competitors face higher tariffs, but the Philippines now trails behind countries like Japan and South Korea, which enjoy lower rates. Despite President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s White House visit, the Philippines got the smallest tariff cut in ASEAN. The new 19% rate is slightly lower than the 20% initially floated, but still above the 17% announced in April. Government debt payments fell to over 768 billion pesos in the first half of the year. Data from the Bureau of the Treasury show this is significantly lower than the 1.28 trillion pesos recorded during the same period last year. Ateneo economist Leonardo Lanzona says the drop is likely a temporary blip rather than a lasting trend. While there's no immediate debt crisis, he flagged key concerns, including debt outpacing economic growth and continued reliance on borrowings. There are also other factors, among them large bond issuances and an accelerating buildup of obligations. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is refining its economic surveillance tools to strengthen policymaking. BSP Deputy Governor Zeno Ronald Abenoja says the central bank is enhancing its ability to capture real-time data and monitor ground-level developments more effectively. He notes the goal is to better understand current conditions and anticipate future trends. Domestic initial public offering activity is expected to stay sluggish for the rest of the year. Jarod Layton Tin, equity research analyst at Dragon Fee Securities, says only 3 IPOs are likely falling short of the local bourse's target of 6. He attributes the weak pipeline to a subdued market and lingering uncertainty over U.S. tariff policies, both of which are weighing on investor sentiment and discouraging listings. From proposed changes to the four-piece program to ongoing relief efforts and expanded services, the Department of Social Welfare and Development continues to serve key roles nationwide. And joining us now to talk about these initiatives is Social Welfare Secretary Rex Gatchalian. Good morning, Secretary Gatchalian. Welcome to Business 360.
Good morning. Good morning to all the televiewers. Thank you for having me this morning.
Let's start with this, Secretary Gatchalian. Senator Erwin Tulfo wants the four-piece program scrapped and give livelihood to the poor instead. Now, what is your reaction to this?
Well, we had a meeting last week and we both agreed to start looking for program enhancements. So I think in the coming months, in the coming days, when we get called to the Senate during the budget season, these things can be threshed out further. We know that the four-piece program is the country's flagship anti-poverty program. It's really meant to break intergenerational poverty. It's an investment to human capital. It's something that the department has been working on for quite some time. And admittedly, there must be program enhancement. I think what Senator Tulfo is talking about would be the aftercare program. We have to also start looking at when families graduate out of four-piece, what do we do with them? We run the risk of them slipping back into poverty. We run the risk of them stagnating. So those were the things that we spoke about last week. We were looking at program enhancements like micro-entrepreneurship for four-piece graduates. There are other tools in the department, such as the Sustainable Livelihood Program, that we spoke about as being part of the toolkit that we can use to make sure that people graduating out of the four-piece don't slip back into poverty.
Now, Secretary Gatchalian, when Senator Tulfo was at the DSWD, he said the four-piece beneficiaries were hurt when they were criticized as mendicants. Did you hear the same sentiment among the beneficiaries?
When I was city mayor, yes. You have to remember I served as city mayor of Valenzuela for 9 years. Obviously, there are everybody. Let's not just focus on the four-piece. Everybody who rate themselves as poor, who come to the department to try to seek for government assistance, would always want a better status and living. They don't want to be perceived as people who are always seeking government help. I think every single Filipino has that sense of pride in them, and that's what he and I agreed on, to try to resharpen our anti-poverty programs so that we don't breed a culture of mendicancy, but rather a culture that empowers our people to decide for themselves. So that's why the concept of giving livelihood assistance, stronger livelihood assistance for our poor, for our four-piece beneficiaries came about. It's something the department has been studying together with the World Bank. We really need to invest in post-four-piece programs that will ensure, as I mentioned, our four-piece not slipping back into poverty. And I guess that applies to every single individual who rate themselves as poor. It's the development side of this department. Remember, we are called Social Welfare and Development, and the development side has to kick in. I think that was the meeting of the mind last week when he came to visit DSWD, that while, yes, social welfare is important, we also have to put equal weight on the development side, making sure that there are long-term solutions that will uplift lives of Filipinos, empower them to open economic opportunities for themselves and their families.
Now, Secretary, the workers lament the money they pay to the government is given to those who are not working. Now, what is your message to them?
I'm sorry, but you got cut off, so I couldn't hear the question.
Secretary, workers lament that the money they pay to the government is given to those who are not working. What is your message?
We have the assistance to individuals in crisis situation. In fact, if you come visit the department right now, the assistance to individuals in crisis situation is open to everybody. It doesn't discriminate if you're poor, non-poor. As long as you're a family or an individual in a crisis situation, a death in the family, a sickness in the family, that window or that program is open for you. So it's something that we extend to everybody.
Now, the U.S. delivered aid over the weekend for those affected by the monsoon rains and storms. Now, how many are still in evacuation centers, and what's the situation right now in those areas?
Again, there are 15,000 families in various evacuation centers all throughout the country. And the reason that they're there are two. One, for instance, when I went to La Union, despite the fact that there's no more flooding in their homes, the only issue that why they can't go home is that their home, the roofing of their homes got destroyed during the typhoon. Hindi sila makauwi. They can't go home. It's not because it's still flooded, but rather their homes are in shambles. Second, you have areas in Pampanga and in Bulacan where floodwaters are still persistent because of the high tide. Same goes with Malabon and Navotas. So those two factors are still compounding the situation why certain 15,000 families cannot normalize their lives yet. But the department, as of this morning, has already distributed close to 1.5 family food packs and government units so that family food packs get to the families affected, whether you're inside the evacuation center or you're outside the evacuation center. Second, we're already plotting out our emergency cash transfers for recovery so that we can make sure that the families that need to repair their homes, repair their livelihood, gets into the program.
Secretary, what's the current situation on the ground, and do we have enough relief supplies for those in the evacuation centers? You mentioned around 15,000 families.
There, again, the situation on the ground is what I mentioned. There are still pockets of areas that are still inundated by floods because of high tide. There are still families in evacuation centers. We'll see to it that we work with the local government units in trying to get more relief into these areas. Second, do we have enough family food packs? Yes. If you can recall, the disaster response portfolio really falls with the local government units. The DSWD comes into the picture to augment our local government units when they don't have enough resources. As mentioned, we've already released close to 1.5 million family food packs since this started. That's around 14 days ago, and we continue to distribute them in areas that are still affected, that still have evacuees. What we're doing right now is we're doing disaster response at the same time producing more family food packs so that we can keep on building our inventory for the next couple of storms.
Okay. Now, Secretary, President Marcos in his son has said that there should be an amendment to the four-piece laws, possibly to extend the stay of a beneficiary beyond 7 years. Now, do you think it has enough support in the Senate and House, and how long should a beneficiary stay in the program?
Let me contextualize that. What he meant was, and I think he mentioned it for succeedingly in the SONA, that a person's stay in the program should be dictated by the economic status of a person. Meaning, if your life got better, then you should exit already. It shouldn't be an arbitrary number. You have to remember, DSWD does case management. Our social workers visit our four-piece beneficiaries regularly. So if they see and they apply assessment tools, if they see improvement in the economic status of a family, then you can exit. 1.4 million families have already exited since 2023 and 2024. So what the president meant was we have to contextualize exiting in a program. The 7 years number is quite arbitrary. Sometimes you might be able to exit earlier than 7 years. And in some cases where there are unexpected crises that hits a family, then there might be some families that might need longer than 7 years. Case in point, when COVID happened, a whole bunch of families were slated to exit before COVID. But when COVID happened, it set them back by 2 years to 3 years. And then you had the inflation shocks that happened 2 years ago or a year ago. So that set them back further. So basically what we're trying to see is when we do the exits in our conditional cash transfer program, it has to be based on your economic status. Our social workers must be able to assess whether you're still qualified to stay in the program or exit the program. And let me just point out, worldwide, the conditional cash transfer scheme is a tool or a modality used to uplift people's lives. But no program in the world has a 7-year cap. Everybody uses an assessment tool or a proxy means test to exit or put somebody into the program.
Now, Secretary, you mentioned that the livelihood program would better be done. It would be done better after they exit the four-piece program. Now, when that happens, and if that happens, would the DSWD be working with agencies like TESDA or DepEd in terms of creating a educational foundation for the livelihood program that Senator Tulfo wants to happen?
As it is right now, it's a convergence program. The law prescribes that multi-agencies, because we know that poverty is not one agency's purview, but it's a whole of government approach. As it is right now, TESDA, SHED, DTI, DepEd, and whole ADOLE, and a whole bunch of agencies are really part of the convergence. That when a person exits, a family exits the program, then the convergence of agencies must come in to ensure that aftercare is provided, after program care is provided. And clearly, the SWD does not have the technical expertise for entrepreneurship. So we really do tap into the expertise of DTI, TESDA, and the likes, CDA,
so that it becomes sustainable.
Development Authority, to ensure that families who graduate out of the program sustain that upward trajectory and they don't slip back into poverty, or else the human investment to human capital will go to waste.
And finally, Secretary, we saw in the DSWD Facebook page that there's a new satellite office along Commonwealth Avenue. Now, do you plan to open in other areas?
I think you're a bit, let me just clarify. We open satellite offices pretty much every single month. It's nothing new. It's just that it's one of the many satellite offices we've opened and will continue to open.
Okay, Dana, thank you very much for joining us this morning, Secretary Gatchalian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and narratives that matter most to your bottom line. The government is backing the development of a new world-class container terminal in Bawan, Batangas, set to boost trade, jobs, and industry growth in Calabarzon. The Luzon International Container Terminal is slated to be the second largest in the country by 2028. Transportation Secretary Vince Dizon says the project could spur the rise of an industrial hub in the area, bringing factories and employment closer to local communities. Once operational, the port can handle up to 2 million shipping containers a year, easing pressure on Manila and Batangas ports.
Napaka-importante nito, gagong-gago na sa Calabarzon area. Kasi alam naman natin, itong Calabarzon, ito ang ating industrial capital, no, ng Pilipinas. Nandito lahat ng mga factory, marami sa mga factory natin nandito, marami sa mga manufacturing natin nandito. Kaya critical itong port na ito, no?
For the first time in 18 years, a Philippine president is making a state visit to India. President Marcos will be in New Delhi until August 8 to mark 75 years of diplomatic ties, focusing on economy, security, and science cooperation. He'll meet with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, top Indian officials and business leaders, including a trip to Bangalore to talk investments. Marcos is also set to meet members of the Filipino community while in the country. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has fired an undersecretary of the Public Works and Highways Department over alleged unexplained wealth. The revelation was made by Senator Erwin Tulfo in an interview with Abante. Tulfo described the official as the richest DPWH undersecretary in the world, but he did not name the official, saying it was the president's prerogative. He added that the firing was made amid the administration's push to tighten oversight of infrastructure spending. Tulfo also said the palace is considering new rules that would bar lawmakers from controlling funds for flood control projects. The Department of Public Works and Highways is amenable to local government units handling flood control projects within their jurisdiction. But in an interview on BNC's Agenda Weekend, DPWH Secretary Manuel Bonoan clarifies that this would require careful coordination among local governments. There have been allegations ghost projects were inserted in the 2025 budget.
Very much welcome po. I think very much welcome kung talagang kukunin po nila yung responsibilidad ng lahat ng flood control on their own and their own resources. Kung kukunin po ng mga local government units, I think dapat sila mag-usap how they're going to integrate the entire flood control program.
So far, value turnover has reached more than 837 million pesos. Meanwhile, in currency markets, the peso opened at 57.75 to the dollar, appreciating from previous close of 58.15. We're taking a short break. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back to Business 360. Malacanang is taking aim at Vice President Sara Duterte over her string of personal trips abroad, calling it a world tour. While the Vice President defends her actions, the palace questions whether these travels align with her duties as the impeachment case against her still looms. George Cahiles reports.
Malacanang once again took a swipe at Vice President Sara Duterte over her personal trips abroad. Palace Press Officer Undersecretary Claire Castro described Duterte's string of overseas trips a world tour.
Hindi po natin mapipigilan ang Vice Presidente kung gusto niya pong magkaroon ng world tour sa pamamagitan ng kanyang personal trip. Hindi po natin alam kung ano yung pupuntahan niya. Wala pa po nasabi sa akin kung personal trip ito ulit.
Castro didn't drop names, but she drew a contrast between the President's work and the Vice President's travel. While the President's trust rating jumped 10 points before his SONA, Duterte's numbers remained higher at 61%.
Nakikita ng tao kung sino talaga ang nagtatrabaho. Nakikita ng tao kung sino yung may puso para sa taong bayan, para umangat ang buhay ng mga Pilipino. Nakikita rin nila, sabi ko, I feel na di-differentiate nila kung sino talaga yung nagtatrabaho at sino lang yung nagbabakasyon.
Speaking of, klaruhin po natin yan. Sino po ang sinasabi niyong nagbabakasyon at hindi nagtatrabaho?
Sino ba yung madalas mag-personal trips? Kayo, alam niyo na yan kung sino.
The Vice President spent nearly a month in the Netherlands following the arrest and detention of her father, former President Rodrigo Duterte in The Hague last March. In May, she flew to Qatar for a gathering with the Filipino community. She returned to The Hague shortly after to celebrate her birthday with her father. In June, she went to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, then Melbourne, Australia. Recently, she visited Filipinos in South Korea. She earlier announced another upcoming trip to Kuwait on August 8. Bilyonaryo News Channel tried to confirm this with her team. So far, no clear response. The Office of the Vice President maintains that all of Duterte's trips are cleared by Malacanang, which raises the question, if the palace is questioning her travels, why is it still giving her the green light?
Kung kayo po ang tatanungin ko at sasabihin nyo na hindi dapat payagan ng Vice Presidente, ano po ang magiging tingin na naman ng mga supporter ng Vice Presidente? Sasabihin naman na ang freedom of movement niya ay hinahadlangan. Kung ganyan po ang gusto niya mangyari at lagi po siya nasa ibang bansa para sa personal trips niya, yan po naman ay kargo niya sa mga taong bayan at sa mga constituents at mga Pilipino.
Vice President Duterte earlier fired back at palace criticisms over her foreign travels.
Hindi ibig sabihin na personal na lakad yan ay holiday o pamamasyal yan. So, yun yung ibig sabihin ng personal. Walang ginamit na pera ng gobyerno sa lakad na ito. Pero nagtatrabaho pa rin ako. Kung hindi sila bobo, maiintindihan nila yung ginagawa ko eh.
Meanwhile, the impeachment case against Duterte is still hanging, despite the Supreme Court ruling it unconstitutional. The House is preparing to appeal the ruling, and the Senate is scheduled to vote on August 6 on whether to comply with the court's decision. Malacanang says it won't interfere and will respect whatever the Supreme Court decides. George Cahiles, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The Philippines is expected to import over 4 million metric tons of rice this year to cover a 70% gap between local production and demand. Despite a strong first-half harvest of 9 million metric tons, full-year output is projected to fall short of the 15.5 million metric ton demand. As of July, 2.3 million metric tons of imported rice have arrived, mostly from Vietnam and Myanmar. Authorities have also approved import clearances for over 3 million metric tons of rice. Agriculture officials says imports will be lower than last year's record high, but stress that weather conditions will be key to hitting harvest targets. Apple Pay and Google Pay can operate in the Philippines without registering with the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. BSP Deputy Governor Mamerto Tangonan says both platforms are considered technology service providers, not operators of payment systems, and therefore don't need prior registration. He explains that since the services don't store funds, process payments, or have contracts with merchants, they fall outside BSP's registration requirements. In contrast, platforms holding user funds would qualify as OPS under BSP rules. The Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections may be pushed back until November 2026, but the decision is still in the hands of President Marcos. Amid legal debates and questions on timing, the COMELEC remains ready for any outcome with registration still open for new voters. Kian Carol has the details.
Talks about the postponement of the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections, or BSKE, is likely to happen. Supposedly this December, it may now be rescheduled in November 1, 2026, pending President Bongbong Marcos signing the bill. However, according to election lawyer Romulo Macalintal, he is uncertain that PBBM will sign it due to the rescheduled date also being on All Saints' Day. Several issues were raised by Macalintal, such as the stretching an incumbent official's term without any formal mandate, and the possible violation of one subject, one title under the 1987 Constitution. According to Commission on Elections Chairman George Garcia, non-voters will still have an option to register in the upcoming days.
Siyempre yung primary initiative natin, lalo-lalo na sa paghahanda sa barangay and SK elections, itong registration of voters natin. Sa buong Pilipinas po natin ito ginagawa dahil nga sa hindi pa naman po maliwanag na talagang marireset ang barangay and SK elections. And so, kinakailangan magparehistro tayo, lalo na yung mga kabataan na 15 to 17 years old.
If the Supreme Court will issue a restraining order, COMELEC said they will be ready if it comes to legal matters. The poll body adds, a ceremonial signing of the bill by PBBM is scheduled on August 12. But the COMELEC continued to prepare for the BSKE. A number of Manila residents lined up on a Sunday morning to register. They echoed their statements that
tama. Kung sakali may mga problema o kaya sa pang-ano na rin, profile na rin mismo ng tao tsaka yung mga iba pang aspeto kagaya ng pananalapi po.
COMELEC expects 1 million new voters within the 10-day registration period. Several special registration anywhere programs or SRAP are stationed and accessible at the COMELEC main building in Intramuros, NAIA Terminals 1 and 3, LRT 2, and PITX. Satellite offices are also available inside several commercial malls. The scheduled posts can be viewed in COMELEC's social media pages and website. The SRAP is up until August 7, 2025. Kian Carol, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
We're taking a breather. Business 360 will be right back. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is optimistic that trade talks with the U.S. will lead to a constructive outcome. He's expected to speak with U.S. President Donald Trump in the coming days. The U.S. imposed a 35% tariff on goods not covered by the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement.
We can give ourselves far more than anyone can take away. We're building this great country. I just met with the Premier, building BC, building Canada, building in a Canadian way. Building sustainably, building together, building positively, and that's what we're going to do. And yes, we will come to something with the Americans, something constructive with the Americans. This is the essence of Canada. It's to be who we want to be. It's to love whom we want to love. It's the freedom. It's the diversity. It's the pride. It's the celebration. It's what's great about our country, and I'm just thrilled to be part of it.
A top aide to President Donald Trump accuses India of financing Russia's war in Ukraine, citing its purchase of oil from Moscow. The allegation was made by Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House and one of Trump's most influential aides. The Indian embassy in Washington has yet to issue a response. President Trump slapped a 25% tariff on Indian products due to its purchase of military equipment and energy from Russia.
So what he said very clearly is that it is not acceptable for India to continue financing this war by purchasing the oil from Russia. People will be shocked to learn that India is basically tied with China in purchasing Russian oil. That's an astonishing fact. India portrays itself as being one of our closest friends in the world, but they don't accept our products.
Belgium's Air Force dropped the first in a series of aid packages into Gaza in cooperation with Jordan on Sunday. 15 tons of food were dropped into the territory. Gaza's health ministry reports 6 more recently died of starvation and malnutrition in Gaza. The UN said the airdrops of food are insufficient and that Israel must let in far more aid by land. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he was horrified upon seeing conditions of 2 hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. The hostages were in deteriorating physical and mental conditions, raising concern among their families. Netanyahu said the videos are proof that Hamas wants to break Israel, but he vows that this will not happen.
You see them wasting away in a dungeon. But the Hamas monsters surrounding them have thick, fleshy arms. They have everything they need to eat. They are starving them the way the Nazis starved the Jews. And when I see this, I understand exactly what Hamas wants. It doesn't want a deal. It wants to break us through these horrifying videos, through the false propaganda it spreads around the world. But we will not break. I am filled with even stronger determination to free our kidnapped sons, to eliminate Hamas, and to ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to the state of Israel.
And that's it for Business 360. I'm Robert Tan, sitting in for Mikey Oreta. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.